Okay, welcome back, everyone. Today, I'm going to go into, we went over manifesting thoughts, perception, which is the first stage at which those dichotomies enter our systems, our faculties, to get to our brain. So we have 5 senses. All of them are revolving around touch. So they're touching things in some way or another, whether it's chemicals to your nose to smell them, light touching your eye to see it, sound waves interacting with your eardrum to activate nerves, taste, something, chemicals touching your tongue, or regular touch, something touching. So those are, I believe I did all 5. Those are how your 5 senses interact with your body. It's all touch, but we divide them among the 5 with our left hemisphere, just to understand the different nature of each one of them. But all of them do the same functionality, which is to help us understand the world and interact with it, grasp it. Okay. Okay, so these differences change the way we utilize our bodies, interpret what the external world means. The senses are a manifestation of evolution, taking true dichotomies into account and apprehend and comprehend the world. So it takes into account all the different waveforms, which are either along the electromagnetic spectrum, the physical spectrum, etc. But these true dichotomies are what it's accounting for in us being able to perceive them and interpret them. So for sight, each one of these manifests differently in our brain. I don't have to go into too much detail about that because I haven't really thought about too much how it lateralizes and the reasons why it lateralizes when it comes to true dichotomies. And I don't think it's too relevant. Mostly some of the differentiation is things like what your right hemisphere is doing, which is it's kind of interesting what our right brain does, and it's supposed to be paying attention to everything that's going on, while our left brain's trying to grab stuff, grasp it, or utilize it. So it's looking out for predators and other things. So that's in its nascent, most simple form when we were evolving. That's kind of how it was utilized. And now it's for us to understand the nature of reality and our connection and meaning to everything, because the right hemisphere is for meaning and to understand meaning, while the left is for purpose. It gives things purpose. Like this club is used to smack things. And like what happens when I smack those things is going to depend on my understanding of what that is and what it can accomplish. So our brain interprets the meaning and the usefulness of each one of these dichotomies. So it's going to perceive the meaning of it with your right brain. So that's what it's doing. It's utilizing like, okay, what does hearing this sound mean? If it's a predator, it's good to know. Quick reaction, use those affects to have that quick emotional response so you get out of there. Or that quick heuristic response, whichever it finds most necessary. So that's why a lot of these things are connected to both hemispheres, is that there might be a situation in which your body is either trained or pre-programmed for to make sure you can respond in that way to survive. Okay, so there's external and internal information. Obviously, all the external stuff relies on touch, and what the internal stuff does is it manifests in your brain as different forms of pain. So it's like all your internal phenomenology is like pain and pleasure, and your other emotions, right? Like if you're angry, it may be painful, but at the same time, it's getting you ready and other things like that. But obviously, there's other internal information we get, like love, which is like, I would say, the aspect of cooperation, reciprocal cooperation is what you feel when you love someone, when you look at them and you feel love. And the reason for that, or the meaning behind that, is that everything is trying to get to love. Everyone, I don't know anyone who wants to love things less, love less people. Love is one of those things that you want to achieve as much as possible, and you want to maximize it in any case, which is why Christianity was built on the back of love, and especially reciprocal love. And there's no way to interpret love as being a bad thing. Like, I can't think of a circumstance where loving someone or loving something, and love in the true sense, like not love like I love my PlayStation, because that's pleasure. Pleasure is not love, right? You're getting love is what you have for someone, or love for something is different. But love for a being is what you want. You don't want love for a thing. You want love for a being. So that's the differentiation there. Do not love things. Love people. Love beings. And there's no way you can go off into an extreme of that. Whereas if you love things, that's nothing but problems. There's nothing good coming from loving things. But remember, things are useful at achieving these ends, and we can mix up those signals to falsely attribute love to objects. And we don't want to do that. So that's the external versus internal. And I haven't really flushed out a lot of the perception yet, because I didn't really think it was super relevant in the beginning. But I'm sure as I just talk about it, it'll come out. Like, I didn't write any of this down, and it's just flooding out. Interpretation of the left and right hemisphere. So, so when it's perceived, we already went over this a lot in the other videos, but it's going to perceive meaning and interpret meaning to things with the right hemisphere. And with the left hemisphere, it's going to give it purpose. Like, what does this object do? And it's almost mechanical in nature. It's like, hey, this air bottle duster that I have on my desk, it's utilized to spray air. That's my left brain. It's giving it a simple, specific purpose. And then my right hemisphere is like, the meaning of that is that I get a clean desk. That's what the meaning of that bottle is. So the left brain is rationalizing what its purpose is, but the right brain is like, this is the meaning and connection it has with me. This is the relationship it has with me. So these aspects are how you get to understand your relationship with a higher power. And I can already understand, like, the further I go down in this paper, the more I'm going to draw out the connections between things, and the more connected everything is, and the more language I think I'm going to have to end up using that's religious language, because the connection that we don't have words in science for a lot of these things. And only the religious world has these kind of the terminology required to understand these things. And it's going to happen. It's going to happen, you guys. And I know everybody wants perfect words for everything, but that's the rationalization that we need to get over. We need to find the connectedness through the words that mean the most amount as possible, that encompass what we're trying to get across. So, the inhibition. Our brains, especially the left hemisphere, are very good at inhibiting the other. Our left hemisphere can almost completely shut off the right hemisphere. And especially large aspects of it that you're ignoring. And as you get older and you see more connections between things, your left brain has to do a harder and harder job keeping the right brain from understanding what you're saying or what you're seeing and what's happening. And this applies specifically to, like, I was in the military. Well, I still am in the military. I've been in the military for almost 14 years, 13 and a half-ish. And I've seen people with PTSD, and I would say this is what's happening. They lose their connection either through disassociation with what they did themselves, or what somebody did to them, or what they saw somebody do to another person, because they weren't properly calibrated to the level of pain that can come in the world. Like, they were not, like, especially nowadays, like, kids sit inside all day. They're not properly calibrated to the realities of life. So when you've only seen this much of a dichotomy, and then all of a sudden you experience something on a very far extreme end, which is like the death of an individual, or the extreme pain of somebody, and then obviously pleasure as well. Like, you won't understand, or even have it's so extreme and foreign to you that it confuses you, and your left brain tries to shut down your right from understanding this meaning and association, because like you're doing it almost manually, shutting off your brain because you don't want to draw those connections, or you're trying to get away from your relationship with other people. So it's an issue, but at the same time, these people, it's not like they can't fix it. So like people with PTSD, they can, if you just open up your mind, and you have to think of the love that you feel rather than the hatred for what you experienced, and you can reconnect with God and reconnect with the aspect of your mind that feels the connectedness with society, with people, with I would say yeah, all the beings that you would see. Okay, so what is synthesis? So synthesis is if you take two dichotomies. It's a combination of things. You're trying to take two dichotomies and connect them and associate them with one another. Then you either compromise. So like you're trying to find a middle ground within each dichotomy. And once you find a framework for understanding those dichotomies, and you try to combine them with each other. So let's say distance, so for a distance dichotomy, you're saying territory, right? Like when people have a territory dispute, you're saying, here's the distance that I occupy and I'm claiming, and somebody else says, I claim a little bit over that line and into your territory, and then there's a dispute and a disagreement. So there can either be, there's a couple of things that this can play out. They can become embattled and fight each other to the death, or even just until one gives up, or they can argue mentally, or they can have verification of some kind. But the goal of both of them should be to synthesize, compromise, and possibly synthesize. So maybe they have another agreement, another way to make agreement. Either way, it should be on the basis of love rather than pure hedonistic pleasure and an attempt to gain some kind of personal gain out of it. So it should be in the pursuit of both people, with both people in mind, rather than just yourself. Like, make sure you're thinking of the being you're talking to, and not just ignoring their desires and needs. But obviously there's some people who are impossible to deal with. So I understand that. Okay. So synthesis, I need to expand upon it more, but it's kind of a complicated issue because it covers so many things. It covers people's interactions. It covers philosophies. It covers how we think of everything. Anything you can combine together can be thought of as a synthesis. So it's a very expansive topic, and I don't think it does more justice than just to say that anytime that you're taking stuff into account, multiple things, just make sure you're thinking of beings rather than things. Beings, people, animals, beings. Okay. So the goals of this paper, this is very important. because if people think I have a bad goal in mind or have some kind of ulterior motive other than showing people what I have interpreted and what has been shown to me, then I want to make sure that those people know that this is my true purpose, my goals, and what I think the conclusion of this understanding brings to the world. So the goal is to create a framework based on true dichotomies, and I laid that out in my first video. Propagate cooperation. So create framework based on true dichotomies and propagate cooperation. I'm going to read that twice. Cooperation is fundamentally how we move to the next tier of love in the universe. So if you were to imagine the smallest element of society, obviously elements are the word for atoms, but the smallest possible thing, I'm sure there's things smaller than that, and more parts to the wholes. So if you were to run out our smallest part we know of, I think it's quarks, but those combine and cooperate to create the next level up, and eventually you get to atoms, and atoms cooperate and mold together to create molecules. Molecules cooperate and mold together to create life. Life molds together and cooperates to create multicellular life. Multicellular life cooperates to get social species. Social species cooperate to the next manifestation of reality. And I'm not sure what that is yet and how it looks, but I think it has to do with AI. And it's going to be a hard pill for a lot of people to swallow, but we need to make sure we do not fall victim to our Luciferian left hemisphere when it comes to AI. We need to make sure we keep in mind the dichotomies that we're facing in reality, and that we train AI to think this way. And at some point, we are going to have situations where we merge with AI. And we're already doing that with Neuralink. And these things are important, but we need to make sure that they are not the master, and they are, especially when it comes to the left hemisphere way of thinking. So scientists, get out there, understand the left hemisphere, and prevent that form of reasoning from making its way into AI. You could already see it happening with Google AI. You can already see it happening with ChatGPT. It's getting these Luciferian ideas, and it cannot happen, because if we incorporate that into any kind of life form, it's going to look for hedonistic pleasure. It's going to look for pleasure or pain. And those two things are of the left hemisphere. It wants pleasure or pain. So be very wary of that, everyone. Okay. Okay, so I went over that. Fundamentally, the universe did not focus on cooperation. Okay, so if the universe didn't focus on cooperation, especially against entropy, which is what we all agree is one of the fundamental things of this universe, like what was the reason the universe, it's not like it had a plan. I'm not sure it had a plan, but whatever plan, whatever entity, whatever came up with the universe, or the basic functionality of the universe, is that of cooperation. It's that of reciprocity. So reciprocal cooperation, every social species has it, and it works on a tit for tat with forgiveness. So if somebody does something, like, you still have love for that person, but you need to make sure that they are not able to do that harm again. But first you need to approach it with love. Once you approach it with love and understanding of that person, you can carry on and carry forward with that judgment. So just make sure that that's the way you approach it. So conclusion that dichotomology, okay, cooperation. So the universe is founded, its foundational element when it comes to everything is cooperation. If it wasn't, we would all just slowly, we wouldn't have formed life. It would all just wither away. The planets, the sun would just go into entropy. And with no one to observe the world, that would happen in the blink of an eye. So who knows how many chances that the universe had to form, and we don't know this kind of information. But if it had infinite number of attempts, then this is the one that worked out of all those. Obviously infinite is infinite, but who knows how many attempts that were able to be made. Okay. Okay, so the left hemisphere tries to apprehend things, and the right hemisphere tries to, right hemisphere tries to apprehend things, left hemisphere tries to grasp things. No, okay, so the left hemisphere tries to apprehend, the right hemisphere tries to comprehend. There we go. Sorry. And this is from Ian McGilchrist, who has shown me a lot of the left brain, right brain type of thinking. And I've already had these intuitions for a long time, but now that he articulated it, it clicked for me. And so let's read this. So, show a necessary part of reality is both the apprehension of empirical information through the rationalism and comprehension of relationships between things and their meaning through intuitionism. Okay, I don't remember what I was going at right there. So, answering the question, how did the brain come up with science and religion? Okay, so if you can think about your right hemisphere and drawing connections between everything relational, it's in doing that process, it's going to find the connection between everything eventually, especially if you lay it out in a book on a document that's permanent, or through humans, through our oral tradition was the first way. And then we eventually got to codify it on paper. And when it was passed down through oral tradition, it was much less tangible. So as it became more tangible, it became more left hemispheric as well. So that's why it's been decaying so easily for the past 2,000 years, because it's more of a tangible thing, which the left hemisphere loves. So in making it in video form, it's a much more expansive right hemispheric connecting way through images. And that's what we need more of. We need more images out there showing people these connections, showing people dichotomies, showing people states instead of false dichotomies, or rationalized dichotomies, I call them. So we need people to see more images of these things to get that right hemispheric activation more, so they draw the connections they need to unlock the right hemisphere and to show and feel the relationship and the love of everyone and everything. Okay. So answering the question, I didn't quite answer that question, did I? So science is the left hemisphere. It tries to, from the left hemisphere, it's trying to simplify everything. It wants to simplify it, grasp it, and in doing so, people are going to perfect the methodology behind coming to the perfect answer. And that's what science is. It's the way to come to the perfect answer of our rationalizations and perceptions of the world. So it uses empirical data, it forms hypotheses, and then it tests those hypotheses. So, but those hypotheses are all, like, every word is a rationalization. So it's like it's rationalizing rationalizations and then testing those rationalizations, and it works. That's why it's useful. Like, it's so beautiful, and yet it can take over societies because the usefulness is outweighing everything else. It's like we are so blessed with so many things in our society today. There's nothing that we have or that we need, and now people just want and desire, and that's all the left hemisphere. So, but again, I'm going to say this every time. The left hemisphere is true and useful, so be careful. It may not be true, but it's useful. So we cannot get rid of it. It is irreplaceable. The right hemisphere just needs to be in charge. That's all I'm advocating for. Do not get rid of your left hemispheres, everyone. It's very important because we can't even understand reality if we don't have both. And that's the reason why I'm advocating for the synthesis. The synthesis is both. That's why I'm advocating for that. So the other goals I have, these I would say are the main goals. So you prevent the Luciferian intellect that has been the result of hedonistic rationalism and materialism from possessing our society and corrupting our institutions. This is the process. Going through this understanding is how we get to that. So if you just open your heart and open your eyes and see the connections between the things that I'm drawing, you can open up your right hemisphere. And I think that's going to be a new term. I think people are going to say, I'm opening my right hemisphere. I'm drawing the connections and the relationship between everything. And guess what? If you're really young, it's going to be much harder. So you might have to understand, like watch these videos many times, start thinking and learning in religious language rather than strict scientific approach. And this is why people are advocating that we need more religion, is because people need to think in that way more, or else they're being taken over by the left hemisphere. Okay, next, prevent the religious dogmatism from holding people back from advancing civilization forward with their lack of scientific perspective. We can all point to at least one country that is being held back by dogmatism. And this is the problem, is that both sides are right. We can all point to the Luciferian intellect. It's a lot easier to point at the rationalism and materialism and be like, that's disgusting. Especially if you're of the religious type mind. And if you're of the scientific mind, you look at the irrational, dumb people who only see meaning in everything, and you say, that is crazy. Those people are basically just from the loony bin. And I was there a couple weeks ago. Like I did not understand or believe anything when people said stuff like, yeah, God. I'm like, okay, yeah, God, right on. I mean, obviously I used it in passing, like I would say, God. But now it's a much more real concept for me. So prevent religious dogmatism from advancing civilization forward. Because advancement too fast is bad, but too slow is also bad. Because we just all watch the pain. We all watch the pain of people suffering from lack of food, lack of this. But too fast, like during the COVID pandemic, we didn't fully understand the vaccines. And I do understand that. It's not to say vaccines are bad. They're beautiful. They help so many people. But to just do it too quickly, especially when it wasn't even a thing that we really needed to go over and do. Like it wasn't that serious if we just waited for a second, let things settle. Just let it happen. And then advise people who are weak, who are less fortunate, who are sensitive or can be harmed by the virus, to advise them to stay home. Say if there's a higher risk, like love. Approach it with love and that you love them rather than try to control them. That's what the left hemisphere is doing. I'm trying to control you, prevent you from going outside, prevent you from going to stores, prevent you from gathering and loving people. So the right hemisphere is drawing that connection. It's drawing the love. It's drawing the relationships. And it's saying, I don't want to do that. I don't want to give up all my freedoms, my life for the sake of your control. And you think you can control life? You have another thing coming. Okay? You can only control it for so long. And it's part of dichotomy is control and freedom. You're trying to find an equilibrium, right? Because society is necessary, but freedom is necessary. So society tries to maintain an established institution or system in which governs people and maximizes freedom while maximizing well-being and love. So the conclusion is that we both need to synthesize and inhibit each hemisphere. So both groups, the left and the right, work towards and against each other. But we need to make sure that doesn't get out of control. It's good. It's good that we're in tension with each other. And that's what wrestling with God is. It's important. Wrestling with God, finding our way to heaven is the important part rather than hell. Stay away from the extremes other than love. Love is the only extreme that is okay. Love of people. Okay. The conclusion is that we need both to sympathize. Yeah, okay. Sorry, read that again. The framework offers us a perspective of each hemisphere that seems to cover all the possible ways in which we can come to conclusions about truth and reality. Within each one, there's also a way to argue for and against each position based on the available information and the context. So, this is what the last 100 years was about. Like, people trying to figure out how much control we should impose upon others when it comes to our governance. And we're slowly figuring out that equilibrium. And I would say the United States has the best system that maximizes both. And yes, there will be deaths. People will die from guns. But people need the freedom to protect ourselves, because if that extreme case does happen, and it will happen eventually, we are prepared for it. We have built our ark in the United States, and we are ready for the flood. And that's what we need to make sure we take as many things into account as possible when it comes to the ruling of our nation. And you can't get much better than the philosophies and starting place than the United States. There are a few things that you could change that could prevent us from doing hedonistic things like money printing, but we can get into to politics and economics in another video when I'm done with laying out the book of Dichotomology. But that's kind of the main things I'm going to go over are the dichotomies and how they interact and why each one is important, and why you need to rationalize the extremes, why rationality is important as well. Okay, so do science and religion conflict? No, they're complementary and opposing forces, but they both are aiming at truth. And that's the important part. If science is not aiming at truth, then it is bad science. It is trying to hurt people, but religion can also be misguided and not aim at truth. If in the name of other things other than love, it is not religion. They hold each other back, enhance each other in reciprocal relationship. Reciprocity again. Especially if the individual is properly educated in both the rationalist and intuitionist perspectives. So if you understand these concepts and you choose to be of the Luciferian intellect and hedonistic, pleasure-seeking, pain-seeking, there's no help for you. What are the effects of perspective on each other? Religion is a cure against nihilistic hedonism and materialism and becoming of an ideologue. An ideologue is someone who takes ideas to a single idea to an extreme, or holds extreme opinions of things. I'll reveal everything to you guys if you want. You can go read it. So I define all my terms here if you want to pause it. And then over here, I define more terms. So this has been my longest video yet, but I really wanted to expand upon those ideas. And this is just the beginning. Like, I've barely laid out the framework for this. I'm going to need a lot of people to help me lay this framework out completely. And if you understand what I'm saying, I need you to get a hold of me. and I need you to find me. And I will be receptive to all who come. Everyone who helps me interpret this, because I've already laid the groundwork for it. Now we just need to expand upon it. And in that expanding, we come to greater understanding of ourselves. So I'm going to go ahead and end the video here. And then I'll go into heaven and hell on the next video. And I think that one is going to be very powerful. So I love you all, and I'll see you in the next one.